Do you want a bank that talks sustainable growth or walks it? The series is brought to you by Nedbank Corporate and Investment Banking.
With me now is Mike Peo. He is Head of Infrastructure, Energy and Telecommunications at Nedbank Corporate Investment Banking. Mike, good to have you with me, and we are talking about green hydrogen today. Now, it's early days in the green hydrogen space, so take us slowly through what is actually happening and whether this is going to be transformative for the energy landscape in South Africa and potentially even Africa.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bronwyn. So I think we really are on the cusp of a revolution in the energy space. We talk about the fourth industrial revolution that is coming down the road, whether we like it or not. And absolutely critical to that is going to be transformative energy plays that enable things like smart cities, etc. So what green hydrogen really is we are shifting away from carbon-based fuel sources like coal and oil into a brand new source of fuel. And so while I say brand new, the exploitation of the opportunity is really new, whereas the production of hydrogen and the use of hydrogen has existed for many centuries now. So the opportunity is first and foremost probably to clean up and decarbonize the world and help the world to shift away from fossil-based fuel sources to something new.
And go to this just climate transition.
Absolutely. So the imperative in South Africa is we have two of the biggest polluters in the world in Eskom and Sasol. We need to clean them up, and we completely acknowledge that we don't just get there overnight. There has to be a proper transition. We've got jobs to protect. We've got human beings who are employed in not only coal mining, but in running coal plants. All of our steel plants, Sasol, currently are all principally operated off coal. But we have a commitment to ultimately decarbonize or become irrelevant in world industry. So the hydrogen opportunity, in my mind, is a reindustrialization opportunity first and foremost. It's early days, but it creates this pathway where we can start off by producing and exporting or using locally green ammonia. And as the costs of production of green hydrogen become cheaper and the transportation of it, we can be at the forefront and we can accelerate that process.
I want to pause there for a moment because you mentioned cost. And in the early days of any development, generally the costs are high. So how quickly do you think we're going to see costs coming down in the green hydrogen space?
So the analogies would be mobile telephony. You'll recall when MTN arrived with its first license, nobody believed we would be able to afford and to own and operate a mobile device that could show you television on this little mobile device. So we're almost at that formative stage now. The advantages for South Africa, so costs come from multiple sources, and there are different costs in the entire chain of hydrogen production. But the easy parts are we have reasonably large amounts of land in areas which are not really useful for anything else. They're not useful for agri, and they're probably not useful for things like mining or tourism right now. We have a lot of land. We have proven through our renewable energy IPP procurement process that we can produce renewable energy at some of the cheapest costs in the world. The real cost differentiator is going to be carbon tax. So right now, we're not factoring that into the cost of production in most instances. But ultimately, if we want to export steel or anything into certainly Western Europe and the United States, we are going to be required to clean up the fuel that is producing that. And if you overlay carbon taxes on top of it, the game changes completely, and suddenly the costs become slightly different.
What you're alluding to here is obviously the supply chain, and the fact that if we are going to play in any global supply chain, we are going to need to be compliant from a climate perspective.
Absolutely. So it comes in at two areas. One would be the physical export of a raw material, but the other is the cost of raising capital. So if Sasol is raising capital in international markets to be efficient and effective, they're going to have to comply to certain climate reduction targets that those investors set. So right now, the buzzword is around sustainable financing. At the heart of sustainability are sustainable development goals being set by the United Nations. Commitments to things like net zero are no longer just being spoken about. Activist investors are going to force borrowers of capital or users of capital to clean up, and I excuse the pun, but really to clean up the cost of their emissions, and hence the commitments by every institution. Nedbank has a net zero target. Institutions are going to have to clean up, and for the right reasons.
When we come to the green hydrogen space, the government is fully behind Project Green Hydrogen, if I may refer to it as that.
So the South African government is, as recently as the mining Indaba, President Ramaphosa committed to an absolute commitment to a green hydrogen economy in South Africa. The Department of Science and Technology, for example, has issued a roadmap. My cautionary piece would be that we don't overregulate. The private sector should be allowed to get ahead and produce and manufacture and do what it needs to do. The regulation is required in certain aspects. For example, to be a green hydrogen or green ammonia exporter, you need to operate through Transnet. Through the ports, you need to be able to ship product, you need to use pipelines, and you need pipeline infrastructure. 100% of the focus should now be on creating the enabling infrastructure and the enabling regulatory environment.
What are the chances that we won't see overregulation in this space? I mean, this is something that plagues many, many sectors, and the red tape is often the largest impediment to growth.
So I'm going to give government the benefit of the doubt this time. Under President Ramaphosa, they have set up Infrastructure South Africa. So under Dr. Ramaphosa at Infrastructure South Africa, there is a green hydrogen team. My concern would be that in trying to find a balance in the just transition, we spend too much time consulting. Just energy transition is a massive consultation. It doesn't need to be applied to allowing people to get stuck in. If somebody has the capital to start building a green ammonia plant, all the government should be doing is unblocking roadblocks, making sure the environmental process happens quickly and timeously. There's complications. It needs water use, it needs land use, etc. The permitting and regulatory environment has to be made as simple as possible. We're competing against Chile, against Australia, against the entire Middle East. So we need to move with speed and be very careful not to overregulate.
Final question. Will green hydrogen be transformative for the African continent? And potentially South Africa takes that lead?
I absolutely believe so. I mean, there is no logical reason why we couldn't. I mean, it does not need to be done on the scale. South Africa clearly can do it at a scale that I don't think anybody else in sub-Saharan Africa can do. That's an absolute imperative for us to grab that advantage now. North Africa and the Middle East are going to compete on scale. The amount of capital available in the Middle East is off the charts. But for example, the ability for a country like Malawi that may export certain produce, greening up ammonia for fertilizer is an imperative now. Zimbabwe, Zambia. So a lot of Africa can play in the value chain. Countries like Namibia are stealing a march already. Namibia is currently engaging in a number of projects to create green ammonia and then subsequently green hydrogen plays. So it's a speed to market play right now.
Mike, thank you very much for your time. I've been chatting to Mike Peo, who is Head of Infrastructure, Energy and Telecommunications at Nedbank Corporate Investment Banking.
Do you want a bank that talks sustainable growth or walks it? The series is brought to you by Nedbank Corporate and Investment Banking.